Everyone, Sean O'Connor here from Macabre Daily. I take care of the Paper Cuts column for Macabre Daily, which of course reaches out to the most exciting, fascinating, and talented authors that the horror world has to provide for us. And tonight I have the pleasure of welcoming the co-authors of what is now my favorite novel, and I'm telling everyone about it. And if they don't immediately run out and either get the novel itself or the audiobook, I have to talk about the audiobook because I listened to that as well. And the people that you have that did the audiobook, I mean, it's a Penny Dreadful come to life. But who do I have with me tonight? I've got David Demchuk and I've got Corrine Clark with me. Corrine, I've got that right. Right? I told
Yes,
you
you
I've
have
got
it right.
way too many teeth in
Yeah,
this silly mouth of mine.
that's okay.
They've collaborated on The Butcher's Daughter, the hitherto untold story of Mrs. Lovett, who is finally getting her spotlight. Sweeney Todd be damned. We got enough about him. Although maybe he does, maybe he does pop up a bit here and there in the novel. But Mrs. Lovett gets a chance to shine. I would like to tell you a little bit about our guest tonight, though. David, let's start with you. David Demchuk's debut, The Bone Mother, was nominated for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, the Amazon First Novel Award, the Toronto Book Award, the Kobser Book Award, and a Shirley Jackson Award. You're coming off a real slacker. And won the 2018 Sunburst Award for Best Novel. Red X was listed as CBC Books pick for Best Canadian Fiction of the Year and a New York Public Library Best Book of 2021. He now lives with his husband in St. John's, Newfoundland. And David, I this may be strange, but I'm actually going to promote another podcast that I'm begging everyone to go out and listen to, which is A House of a Thousand Words, I believe. You did a phenomenal interview with them not that long ago where you talked at length about Red X, and it's just phenomenal. So I'm telling everybody, and I'll put a link to it actually in the show notes too, because you did a really, really fantastic interview with them, and I'd love everyone to take a listen to it.
I had such a good time on that. It was such a great conversation. So, yes, thank you for the plug. I encourage everybody to go listen.
You get it. You got it. You got it. And you're a hoot too. I mean, you're a very funny guy. So it's always a pleasure. And Corrine Clark
Yes.
Scott, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Oh no, I
I heard my
just want to
name.
give your accolades. Your Gothic heart loves shadowy stories about Victorian London. We share that in common. In 2018, an excerpt from your manuscript in progress, set in the slums of 19th century London, won a PRH Canada Student Award for Fiction. You graduated from the University of Toronto School of Continuing Education. I'm a former English teacher myself. Love it, love it. And you live with your husband in Southern Ontario, Canada. I have two incredible Canadian people with me, and please don't hold my Americanness against me, I guess I'm going to say. And
No.
when I talk to new Canadian friends, the one thing that I always say is, could you please either leave the back door open or a window ajar in case I have to beeline? Could you do that for me?
We can certainly do
Yes.
that for you. Of course, we're being Canadians, we're more likely to say things like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry."
It's gonna be a lot of, oh, I'm so sorry, but we'll get through it one day at a time. All right, I want to talk about the novel, but let me just lay the scene for our viewers and for our listeners. All right, so The Butcher's Daughter is set in London in 1887. At the abandoned apartment of a missing young woman, a dossier of evidence is collected. It's ordered chronologically and it's sent to the chief inspector of the London Metropolitan Police. It contains the frightening correspondence between an inquisitive journalist, Miss Emily Gibson, who is missing, by the way, at the start of the novel, and the woman Gibson thinks may be the infamous Mrs. Lovett, Sweeney Todd's accomplice, of course. A wicked woman who baked men into pies. Who knows? You know what? They may have been asking for it and sold them in her pie shop on Fleet Street. The talk of London town, even decades after her horrendous misdeeds. As the woman relays the harrowing account of her life in the unruly and perilous streets of Victorian London, her missives begin to unlock an intricate mystery. The mystery, by the way, is my favorite part of this novel. It's so layered. there's so many things that I just absolutely adore about this book, but it is that central mystery and then how it gradually unfolds. That's like just catnip. So this mystery brings Miss Gibson closer to the truth, even as the truth may cost her everything. It is just an absolutely hair-raising ride, and let's get into it if you don't mind. My first question has to be, how did this collaboration come about?
Okay, well, I can start and then
Yes.
Corrine can chime in. Um, it started really with an obituary that appeared after the death of Stephen Sondheim, who, of course, wrote the music for the musical Sweeney Todd, and which was in turn based on a play, a British play by Christopher Hampton, which, if you go all the way back, was based on a Penny Dreadful called A String of Pearls. And the thing that was obnoxious about the obituary was that it said, in the way that obituaries do, it condenses information. It said that the Sweeney Todd musical was about a murderous barber who baked his victims into pies. And of course, that's totally wrong. And so at a time when one would descend onto Twitter and start complaining about these things, we did. A number of people who were Sondheim fans and Sweeney Todd fans and complained about Mrs. Lovett erasure. And I was having a conversation with another writer friend about why why wasn't there a book looking at the Sweeney Todd story from Mrs. Lovett's point of view? And after we sort of went back and forth about who should do it, I ultimately relented and decided that I should call my agent, who coincidentally was Corine's agent. And so now Corrine can chime in about how that occurred.
Yeah, so I had a phone call from our mutual agent, Barbara, and she started by saying, I have an idea that I think you might be interested in. So I was intrigued. And she said she had another client. She didn't tell me initially who it was, who was interested in writing the backstory of Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd. And that this author was hoping to collaborate with another writer who happened to know a lot about Victorian London. And that's me. I know a lot about Victorian London. It's just always been an interest of mine. I've read lots of fiction and nonfiction to do with Victorian London.
That's so
Um, yeah, so she asked me if I was interested, and I said absolutely. And then she told me that the other author was David Demchuk, and I was already a fan of David's work. So that was a surprise, but a nice surprise. And we agreed to work together, not knowing if it would work out or if we'd be able to work together or anything like that. So we had a Zoom call, the three of us, and we just sort of plunged in and somehow got through a whole novel together, and it was great.
fantastic. I'm sorry, David, you were going to say something?
Yes, I was also going to say we did it in record time. I am a painfully slow
Yeah.
writer.
Oh,
And and I think we sensed early on the book was going to be not small. And so what was great was that Corrine really knew the material incredibly well. I All I knew about Victorian London, I knew secondhand. I did not have original research. I did not have any experience of living in London the way that Corrine did. And so I really needed somebody who was going to be able to provide that kind of like raw, useful, immediate information that would immerse us in the setting, because that was obviously going to be essential for the
Yeah.
work. And so she brought all of that in spades, and she's a much faster writer than me. So what would normally have taken me like, 3 years, took us about a year and a half, which I thought was incredible. And particularly for a book this size
Yeah.
and with this kind of scope. And I think, I mean, at first we were a bit trepidatious because we worked um, very differently in very different kinds of stuff. We have very different levels of experience, but we worked on finding a voice that we could come together on, and a vision that we could come together on as well. And it all just, fairly quickly just sort of snapped into place. And despite, first we were both in Toronto together, but still we didn't meet in person. It was all done basically through Zoom and email. And then I ended up moving all the way here. She ended up moving into Southern Ontario, and yet we continued all of that, even with, moving boxes and and households and various other nightmarish things.
And life,
But
yeah.
and
Life,
life,
yeah.
yes, you try not to think about how life is going to intervene with whatever it is you're working on. But it became, I think, for me at least, possibly for you as well, Corrine, kind of a welcome escape from everything that was going on around us.
It's a nice world to escape to, even though I don't necessarily know that I'd ever want to actually live there. Karina, I've got to. Yeah, David, I see you shaking your head. Yeah, I'm with you. Karina, I know when my fascination. You share your story first, and then I'll give you a little peek about when it started for me. But when did
Okay.
this happen for you with Victorian London?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny because I have a great grandmother in Scotland. She's passed away now. My mother is from a little fishing village in the north of Scotland, and I went over a number of times as a child. And my great grandmother was Victorian. She was born in the Victorian era, and she was an imposing figure with terrible asthma. So she kind of fascinated me and repelled me all at the same time. The house was very Victorian. There was no, inside washroom, anything like that. Um, and I don't know how much of it I'm remembering correctly and how much of it is filled in with my imagination. But my great grandmother was this quite Victorian figure, and the house being very Victorian. And I felt just at home in it. I think that's actually where, I first became interested in the Victorian period. And then when I was a little older, I came across the work of Henry Mayhew, who is a 19th century social historian who lived and worked in London. And he wrote a 4-volume set of books called London Labor and the London Poor. And what he did was he interviewed poor and criminal classes, like prostitutes, criminals, and just people who were very poor selling on the street, and tried to tell their stories in their own voices. So he even tries to capture the way they speak and that kind of thing. And he was trying to sort of get the word out, as it were, to the rest of society. There are people who actually live this way. So when you read this material, it brings that whole world completely to life. And I think that's really what catapulted me. And then I started reading fiction. For example, my favorite novel in the whole world, which is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. And you know, her beautiful writing and the way she writes about 19th century London, I think that just did it for me. And then everything I wrote after that just happened to be in 19th century London.
You played
So,
your
but
strengths.
I love it. And so, I'm continuing to do it for the time being.
Ah, well, I thank you because it certainly paid off with this novel. Just a brief aside for me, Victorian London came to life. I had the benefit. My parents, I'm a New Yorker, so we lived in Queens at the time, and my parents, they felt it was important to take us to the theater. We went to museums, we went to theater. They just felt like they needed to expose us to that kind of culture, which I thank them for. It was fantastic. But anyway, I saw Sweeney Todd in '78, and
Wow.
it was Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou. And here I was, like a monster kid, with the creature feature on Channel 11 and, Chiller Theater. And I didn't know that something like that could exist outside of a television box, and in vivid color. And I just got swept away. And a year later, my parents took me to Dracula, Frank Langella, Dracula. Yeah, David,
Wow.
I see you. You learned
Yeah,
too
honestly, I
much.
envy you so much. You saw such
Wow.
great things.
You're a little jerky kid at the time, but even then, I could appreciate what was happening and what I could see, and it like it everything exploded for me in Technicolor, and I fell in love with the theater, and I just fell even more in love with horror, but especially Victorian London. It opened up this fascinating world, and then movies like have you ever seen Christopher Plummer in Murder by Decree? It's a Jack.
Oh, absolutely. A great Canadian film.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Bob Clark. Yeah, and Christopher Plummer. Um,
Yes.
unbelievable movie. And then, just things like Michael Crichton's The Great Train Robbery, just anything I could get my hands on that had soot on the face and maybe like a page boy cap and leather and what looked like incredibly uncomfortable leather shoes. And I was sold.
Mhm.
So your novel really spoke to me. Let's talk a little bit about the process though, because I know that you're collaborating via Zoom, but as far as expanding on that world, what was the division of labor like? How did you both figure out, okay, what direction are we taking this juggernaut?
Well, there's a lot of overlap. You would think going into something like this, particularly since it's an
Mm.
epistolary novel, there are a lot of different voices that, it would be as simple as, oh, David gets the boy parts and Corrine gets the girl parts, or or David gets, the bureaucratic parts, or, like it never really worked that way. The most important thing for us was to try to figure out, because we gave ourselves a difficult task from the start. Mrs. Lovett's a really engaging character. She's really enjoyable on the stage. But if she were to exist in real life, she would be illiterate. She would have the minimal amount of education. She would be Cockney because she's living in East London. She, you know, there would be things about her that would make her really difficult to read on the page. And so immediately the question was, well, how do you solve that? What other voices, what other characters can we bring in that can help mediate between her, the way she really is, and the reader, Miss Gibson, who is the London journalist. And so Corrine and I did a lot of voice work early on to try to figure out how we were going to land um, Mrs. Lovett or Marjorie or Margaret, depending upon which part of the book you're looking at. And we also started doing work on other characters who would bring a richness to the text so that it wasn't all being shouldered by one really enticing and intriguing character. But everybody was sort of contributing to create a kind of community of voices that she was a part of. Um, Corrine, tell us a bit about how it worked for you as far as investigating these characters.
Well, so initially, David sort of had the idea for the entire project initially, and that was a starting point because he already had some ideas, and he's stronger with plot than I am. So, in our first conversations, David was sort of saying, "Can you give me some ideas of things from Victorian London that maybe are unique that you don't read about very often?" So, I talked about a few things, including the anatomical Venus and some other things. And David was writing notes and went away. And that sparked some ideas for him. And those ideas ended up in the novel. So then David would sort of send me notes and say, you know, let's have this happen next. But I mean, very brief. He wasn't sort of like giving me a prescription for writing the book by any means, but it was like, here's sort of where I see it going. Here's some characters maybe that we could develop, that kind of thing. And so with those notes, I had complete freedom to just write. And I would, as David found out, write thousands of words and then send the material to him, and he had an incredible way of weaving my work and his work together that was absolutely extraordinary to me. So there are paragraphs where some sentences are mine and some sentences are David's. And one of the things that I'm really proud of with the book is that I don't think you can tell that
You
two
cannot.
different authors wrote it together.
Corinne, you cannot. I was just about to say my highest compliment that I could give this book, other than it's fantastic, is that it's seamless. You can't see this isn't a Frankenstein monster where you can see, the stitching. You absolutely cannot tell who wrote what parts, or even, kind of like a vibe of like, oh, this feels like a David part, this feels like a Green
Mhm.
part. It's a fully immersive world with the two of you creating this incredible piece of, you know, horror, mystery, uh, you know, gothic. I mean, it's a gothic horror mystery, but it's so much more than that. It's also this fully immersive experience, and I mean that by, when I read a book or if I'm listening to the audio book, I am transported. Like this book transports me to another world and it engages your five senses. I know it might sound a little silly, but it does. And you smell the streets, and you can feel when you're in the butcher shop. By the way, one of my favorite parts of this novel, it's a simple scene, but it's so harrowing, is when Marjorie's father cuts himself with that cleaver.
Mm.
And on a
Yeah.
dime, the you feel on the page, you feel the tension in that room, that this is what it this I don't want to spoil anything because I want every reader to go in just cold and enjoy it as much as I did. This is very early in the novel, so if I do spoil a little bit, everyone know, please, it's early on and there's a
It's
lot more.
perfectly okay. We
Okay.
approve this particular spoiling because
Yeah,
this was
Thank you.
this was this was part of what was a real challenge for us as well,
Mhm.
is that the early part of the book is set 50 years before, so in the 1830s, and there are a lot of things that were not available at the time, either to the characters or to us. There was no photography, there was no antiseptics. Medicine was extremely primitive. There was nothing to knock you out if somebody was going to be operating on you. Like there were
Mhm.
all of these, and what they did have was crude and was in some cases fanciful and ridiculous, or they were like super hard drugs.
Yeah,
So,
that
things
could
that
kill
they
you,
took for granted
perhaps.
that yeah, that could kill you or addict you. And so we had to grapple with that from the very beginning. Can we have this? Can we have that? If we do this, what's it going to result in? And for us, I mean, we knew as soon as Margaret's father injured herself that the risk was very high, and we had to figure, are we going to kill him? And this became a thing all the way through, because everyone's life is so precarious for a large part of the book. You don't need a serial killer. You've got the whole world, of the novel sort of like, pointed against you. You could go at any time. And so that gave it an extra edge. And it's funny you mentioned the smell as well, because we really, so many versions of Victorian London are necessarily sanitized, that you
Mhm.
don't recognize that there's like sewage in the streets, that there aren't sewer systems, that there is no inside washroom, there are chamber pots, there's maids dealing with that. And so London is smelly, the fog is smelly. There's a miasma coming off the Thames. So that was a thing we didn't want to ignore. That was a thing that we wanted, I wouldn't say to embrace, but that we wanted to recognize was part of the lives of the characters. And again, it was to take you that extra step to being immersed in the book.
What I love, and Corrine, I want to ask you about this, just the setting, the particular settings. What I love
Mhm.
about the novel the most is that we go from the West End when we're in the butcher shop, and it is dank and it smells, and it's a grueling existence. But I will say that there's that family dynamic there. There's the three of
Mhm.
them, and there's love, and there's need. They rely on each other, they count on each other for their very existence, their survival. Then,
Mhm.
and again, not spoiling anything, but through circumstance, then we get Marjorie going to a different location. By the way, is that carriage ride could be a novel alone, what you two did. It's I just you feel yeah, I went through like all the stages of grief as Marjorie's looking out the window. I again,
I will say that the carriage ride is hugely Korean. If we were going to like lay particular parts of the book at each other's feet, I would say the carriage ride, she brought an incredible intensity to it that I was happy to work with. That was just, it offered up so much. And I think again, just puts your puts your reader into the mindset of the character so completely and thoroughly, which is, what you desire the most,
yeah.
and transported is exactly the right word, not just physically, but in every other way.
Well, you've got this location, so we've got, the butcher shop, which is, dank, and we it's bloody and cold, but there's that family dynamic and that spark of love. Then we go to essentially a mansion.
Mhm.
This is where the horror lives. So what you would assume would be, oh, I've made it. Okay, life is going to be better, even though I don't know what's in store for me and I'm scared out of my wits. But look where I am now. And then that is where the terror just unfolds. And I got such a kick out of that. What we assume would be a horrific location was actually like our lovely nest of warmth. And then what should be a better existence we couldn't get out of fast enough if our life depended on it, and it absolutely does. So I'm the question to both of you, Corrine, I'll start with you. How much
Mhm.
fun is it to create settings like that and then play around with them?
Well, it's a lot of fun. David and I had a lot of fun together too, sort of feeding each other little bits as we went back and forth. I'd give him a little idea
Imagine.
about something and he'd come back with something and you're like, ooh. And of course, having read Henry Mayhew, it's the poor people of London that I love to read about and write about. I find them more interesting, generally speaking, than the wealthy people. So the butcher shop at the beginning and the carriage ride and being completely immersed in 19th century London was everything I love. And I hope on the carriage ride, as you get towards the end of the carriage ride, and she's getting closer to the doctor's home, and you see the difference in architecture and the difference in, the clothing that people are wearing and just the manners. And it's almost as if passing through a doorway, literally, because you're going from, this terrible existence, as you say, even though the family members very much loved each other, into a completely different world. It's two totally different worlds. And life for servants was really, really hard. I won't go into all of that detail, but it certainly wasn't an easy life, but it was a very, very different life. And I enjoyed writing about that as well.
How important was it to give those that marginalized community of the servants, the scullery maids, the carriage boys, to give them agency and give them a little moment in the spotlight, but especially for Mrs. Lovett, who we've already established kind of gets a little short shrift there, when it comes to Sweeney Todd. So, David, I'll start with you. How important was it to give her her moment to shine and to really just have at it?
Well, it was, I mean, obviously she's the core character of the story and is really only worth investigating, I think, if you are looking at how she's being treated as a woman, as a single woman, as a woman who yearns to for agency to improve her life, and to see how fiercely the odds are stacked against her. And 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 she's a charismatic character. You're not entirely sure for a large part of the book how it is that you're supposed to take her. You're not entirely sure if everything she's saying is true. She certainly, if it's not true, she's a tremendous storyteller. And that was a thing that I think we both really enjoyed, grappling with was how she was creating the story of her life in this narrative that she was telling to this journalist. But through her, we're also seeing what life is like for the impoverished of London, for the marginalized of London, for women, for the elderly, for children, for itinerant workers, for immigrants. The what a big theme of the book is the commodification of the body, and particularly of people who do not have privilege and who do not have agency, and and how they are sold either entirely or in bits and pieces, sometimes literally, over the course of the book. And I think that was a thing that we both seized on when we were exploring this, and that came to really enrich the entire experience. And Marjorie, of course, is very much at the core of that.
And we had to decide, how do we get a character from whatever childhood she has to being able to make people into pies, because we decided we didn't want her to be a psychopath because that's too easy. And so what kind of beginning does a person have to get to that point. And then we had the fun of filling in all the middle part. But I remember saying to David, because I did know a little bit about butchery, though I did avoid a lot of research until I had to do it. I remember saying she should be a butcher's daughter because, of course, in Victorian London, the view, particularly of butchers and the poorer people, was you use every part of the animal, the nose, the brains, the feet, the tails, the ears, everything. And so we thought, okay, well, someone who's starting from the viewpoint of meat is meat, you use what you have, use what you've got in front of you.
Yeah.
What a perfect way to start with a character who we wanted to be real and not a caricature. That was a great way to launch her into the story and get her to where we needed her to be.
It also gave her some fundamental skills that she was able to draw
Yes.
upon later on. Because, one of the other things that comes up over the course of the book is, well, how is it that she's arrived at any kind of skills in the kitchen? How is it that she knows how to
Mhm.
bake? How is it that she knows how to properly cook meat? I mean, not that we want to go into detail about it, but if you're actually going to prepare human meat and you're going to serve it to people, it's actually a fairly dangerous business. You don't want to knock out your entire clientele.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there as well. And so we had to give her at least a bit of a head start so that she could, when the time was right, draw upon the skills that she needed to in order to basically survive under the maniac upstairs.
Yeah.
So that was a key part as well. The suggestion of her being the butcher's daughter really was a turning point, actually.
Oh, it's so perfect. And I never even thought to ask that. I'm horrible at my job. It just made such logical sense to me that she would be a butcher's daughter. I just never even thought, oh, did you think maybe something else? Like a florist? I don't know. You know, hold that thought 1 second. My pain in the ass dog.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I love the idea of a killer florist.
She knows her way around a pair of shears.
That's exactly right.
Uh, I want to commend you. I know this is turning into, Chris Farley, that interview where he's like, remember that part you wrote? Oh, that was so great. I get it. This has become my favorite novel, and I just absolutely love it.
Wow.
But I want to point out that there are a lot of origin stories that have been written. And the problem that some of them encounter is that they want to get to the part that everyone's familiar with. So they just launch right to it and they don't let it breathe, you know? You two have not done that. By the time we get to Mrs. Lovett baking pies, with what's the part in the book where she's reading, to bake mince pies, get cheap meat, freeze even better, and boy, do we get free meat. But by the time we get there, you've earned it. You've earned it, and the reader is ready for it now, and it just feels organic that we're here now. And then those parts are that much better for it. So I commend you both for taking your time because maybe there was an inclination of let's get to the good stuff. Did you ever have those moments?
I think there was a moment where we were like, where is the good stuff?
Oh, by the way, I should quantify that. The entire book is good. I
The
meant
entire book is
you're
good, but
baking people stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but there's no question that, I mean, I kind of approach it from, this may be news to Corrine. I kind of approach it from like a 7-act structure. And so I knew once we were passing the halfway point that the expectation was starting to grow that either we were going to get to a pie shop somewhere or people were going to feel tremendously ripped off. And so we had to make sure that we were dropping clues along the way that yes, we're getting there. Yes, we're getting there. It's almost there. We're around the corner. It's like here, but at the same time, we didn't want to just at any point tell the same old story over again. It's a story that people who have seen the musical remember quite clearly. It's very familiar to them, and the movie as well. And so we wanted to make sure that there were things that changed up, that there were twists, that there were surprises and reveals, so that even if you knew the story quite well, you would still find something fresh in it. And if you didn't know the story at all, it wouldn't be incoherent. And that was what we were trying to sort of line everything up towards as we were going into sort of like the final section.
Excellent. Oh, well, it lands. That final section is so good. Again, this is where I have to watch my big stupid mouth because it's ripe with spoilers. Okay, I have to ask this. David, you do not outline.
No.
Because
No.
I listened to your interviews. I listened to your interviews. Was it a challenge, Corrine? Was it a challenge because are you an outliner? Is that your process?
I am an outliner.
How
And
did we resolve this?
Yeah, well, part of that probably also comes from being less experienced and having less confidence in my ability to tell a story. But what I found working with David was David gave me just enough to sort of say, let's have the story maybe go this way, but still give me loads of freedom to just write material. So that worked really well. I loved a little bit of guidance, and I also loved the chance to just play with characters and play with the scenes and send the material back to David. So I found that a really great way to work for me.
Yeah. And I'm also, I mean, it's true I don't outline, but I do have, I'm a structure fiend, I suppose. I'm a structure nerd. And so going into it, once we had the form, the epistolary form in place, I had a sense of how things probably needed to unfold. There would be a slow build up, and then we would start getting to crisis, rest, crisis, in that way. So I had a sense of what was happening. And one of the things, I mean, we've already alluded to it, Corrine brought to the table was she brought fresh settings, fresh situations that were really interesting for the story. The orphanage, of course now I'm blanking out. What's it called?
Founding Hospital.
That's right, exactly. And so the Foundling Hospital was something that we hadn't seen a great deal of, and the mechanics of the Foundling Hospital was really great. The aforementioned uh now, of course, I'm blanking.
Anatomical Venus.
Anatomical Venus. That set up a whole scenario inside of the physician's house. There were a couple of other things that I'm going to sort of keep, shrouded, and but they too contributed enormously as far as setting was concerned, as far as characters and conflicts were concerned, and those things, once they were sort of assembled into the unfolding story, they they helped create an outline, as we were going effectively. We didn't hit too many dead ends. We didn't hit too many places
No.
where we wrote stuff and then had to like completely throw it away. Uh, much like Mrs. Lovett, every part got used sooner or later.
And it's all delicious. Okay. I don't I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. You both created this incredible world. I know that it already existed, but you've really it pops off the page. The writing is incredible. I love your sense of pacing, the way you lay out a story, how it unfolds. The as I said previously, the mystery to this book for honestly, we kind of think we know how it ends, but I'm telling everyone right now, you do not. You do not. So that's the hook right there to get as many readers, as many hands as possible on this book, and that's the fun of it all. And I guarantee that I'll co-sign on that. But is there any plan to maybe for the two of you to jump back into this world at a future date? I'd love that. Selfishly, I'd love that.
Well, we did kill a lot of people.
Boy, howdy, you sure
A lot
did.
of pies.
I'm sure, in fact, our publisher is not thrilled with the fact that we snuffed out a majority of the possible paths that we could go from here. So, one can never say never, but we would be creating quite a high, goal for us to set and also the inclination is, as is always the case, people would want us to surpass this book. And there's like 4 books of material in this book. And so it's like, so how do you go higher? How do you go harder? Because you know that people are going to want more horror, more twists, more gothic,
Yeah.
more, and how do you grapple with that? Um, it I would say it's possible. I think we need a rest.
Yes. We've earned it. We both earned it.
Yes.
We need a
Yes. The
little
rest
vacation
would
from
be
this
good.
world.
Yeah.
And then we could probably get into talks about whether we could and how we could do it. But if nothing else comes of it, it has been a wild ride for us as well. It was a wild ride to write, and it's been a wild ride since we started submitting it and since it was picked up, and then everything that's happened since. The other thing that I think that we really have to say is, before we talk about the audiobook, is how beautifully designed the physical book
Hmm.
is.
Oh,
And
Agreed.
we had some input. We contributed some stuff of our own to it, but they just ran with it. Soho did an extraordinary job with the book. It has an incredible look and feel to it that, again, enhances the immersiveness of it. And I know you want to ask questions about the audiobook.
I have to give credit where credit is due. So we've got Jill Tanner, Stephen Crossley, and Amy Scanlon do such a phenomenal job bringing what you've created on the page to life audibly. And it is really like you just immersed in a Penny Dreadful. And it's so good. I'm going to listen to it again. For sure, I'm going to listen to it again because it's just, I believe, 13 hours of sheer bliss. So please, after you've bought the book, because it is gorgeous and you need to have it, please go out and buy the audiobook because these actors have done an incredible job bringing it all to life. I'm going to let you go in a moment. I'm going to ask you how I can best support the novel going forward. But before I do that, I have the one question I ask all my guests. Please recommend it can either be a book, a movie, even a piece of music, something creative that our readers or our viewers would love to check out based in Victorian London.
Hmm.
Well, I can start with one that I read recently, which is called Fine Shade.
Okay.
And the name of the author escapes me at the moment. But it's got all the gothic things that you would like. The main character is a governess, in a creepy old mansion. It's super gothic. But it turns out she's also a bit of a witch. And she's scheming and conniving and is not fond at all of the child that she is supposed to be caring for. And so she has designs on moving up in the world and taking advantage of family members to get there. And for the longest time she's going to get her comeuppance, but you don't know how it's coming. I mean, she's even creeping through, hidden passageways in the mansion, and there's like an automaton monkey, and it's fantastic. And I would
Did you read
recommend
my
that one.
dream
That's
journal? What is
that's a
happening here?
recent read. Yeah, I wish I could
Well,
remember the
now,
author's name, but
well,
it's
now
Fine
I'm
Shade
jealous.
FY. Yeah,
I want us to have an
FYNJ.
automaton monkey. How did we miss that?
Yeah,
A
it's great.
sequel?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes, please and thank you. That is fantastic. All right, David, have you got something for us?
Well, I mean, I had said early on that most of my experience with Victorian London came from Hammer horror movies. Not least because they use the same sets over and over and over again. And I have a tremendous love for them, but at the same time, I couldn't exactly say that they were, documentary realism. But for someone who wants a lot of fun and is willing to put up with some outrageousness, I'm going to heavily recommend Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
be-
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely, with Martine Beswick as Sister Hyde, and who is wonderfully evil and yet an interesting tragic figure. And it has all the things that you love from a Victorian London sort of hammer horror movie. It has the fog, the shadowy sets. Thank goodness you can't see what they really look like. It has the, the skulking, the spooky murders, all of the stuff. And it's a really fascinating, particularly for its time, a really fascinating twist on the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story. Um, that knows how dark and camp it is and has a really sly wit about it, but at the same time is committed to telling a really good story. So I'm a huge fan of it.
Love both those suggestions. That's also got some of the best practical mirror work in a film that's ever been done.
Oh yeah, it's
Oh,
really
so
beautifully done.
okay, now you two get to give me homework. I'm going to write a glowing review for this novel because I absolutely adored it. I thank you so much for coming on here. This, of course, will post on the Macabre Daily YouTube channel. But how else can Macabre Daily help you both out? Do you have events coming up that we can shout out for you? What's the plan to support the novel?
Well, Corrine, you're
Good
going to
question.
England at some point.
Okay.
I am going to the UK on Friday. So the only thing is the book was to come out May 20th in the UK and elsewhere. But due to a production issue with a limited special edition that's also being produced, it's been pushed back to June 24th. So unfortunately, my trip is going to sort of be over just before the book comes out over there. But I will be going back to the UK. I'm going to Bloody Scotland in September, which is sort of a big conference for mystery, thriller, horror, all of that kind of thing. And I believe I'm going to the World Fantasy Conference at the end of October.
Fantastic.
And there's something called Horror Readers Weekend in November in Hudson Valley, and the organizer of that has asked if I would like to attend because she really loved the book. So I'm hoping to attend that one as well. And then whatever appearances pop up for David and I.
Let me know where you both are. I'm
Oh, for
happy
sure.
to promote it for you
Thank
both.
you.
I have a little event here in St. John's this week, if my books arrive, and so fingers and toes are crossed. And but then I don't have much until mine is August. I'm going to be in Seattle for Worldcon, which is the World Science Fiction and Fantasy Convention, and I'm greatly looking forward to that. I tend to go to it nearly every year, and then from that point, we'll also I think we'll both be at CanCon, which is in
Yes.
Ottawa, and that will be in October. And I'm also planning a trip to the UK. I don't have firm dates yet, but I'll be stopping into bookstores in London, in Edinburgh, Manchester, and Glasgow, and so that will be a nice little trip. And those, I think, are pretty much the things that are on the books right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will keep you informed about, the events on our calendar as things pop up.
Perfect.
And overall, I think it's just the more the book is talked up, the better it
Mhm.
is, on the various, platforms. And
Mhm.
and I think it's the kind of book that also gets attention through word of mouth. And I think because particularly as people get into the final pages, there certainly are strong reactions. So,
Mhm.
so I expect that a lot of people, either run around going, you must read this, or they go, "Oh my God, fling." Both of which are valid.
They have the book. All right, they have the book.
Well,
Exactly.
one thing I'll add to that, because you do see it in reviews and things, is there are readers who are really disappointed there isn't more Sweeney Todd in it, or they don't like what we've done in terms of deviating from the plot of the musical. Not realizing that it's based on a Penny Dreadful and that we deliberately made different choices. So that's worth mentioning sometimes is that, you know, based on the Penny Dreadful, not based on the musical and the movie. And it's about Mrs. Lovett. It's not about Sweeney Todd. Of course, he has to be in it because he's a big part of her story, but
Sure.
it's her
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. It's her
Her
origin
story.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, her origin story.
It's deservedly her story. And for
Right.
the readers of Macabre Daily, they are looking for that Penny Dreadful aspect. So this is right in their wheelhouse. This mouth doesn't do a lot of good. You've heard it now for almost an hour, but it is big, and I will shout this book from the
Thank you.
rooftops. I promise you that.
Well, we're
Thank
so
you.
glad you love it. This is so
Yes.
lovely, love it.
I see what you did there, Dave. All right. Well, I can't thank you both enough for coming on. You're incredibly talented people, and you're Canadian, so of course you're both super nice as well.
Thank
Well, we
you.
try. Thank you very much.
Enjoy your evenings, and please,
Thank
if
you.
I can promote anything for the two of you going forward, you've more than earned it. So please let me know.
Thank
Absolutely.
you very much.
Take care.
Absolutely. Take care.
Okay.
Have a good night. Bye.
You too.